Today we are going to continue with and wrap up hopefully chapter 14, that's coordination and control. And we'll be talking about the last topic in the chapter, that is homeostasis. So the book does go into details about different scenarios where homeostasis is employed. I'll be brief about it, covering the main concepts. So homeostasis is basically the control of various parameters of the body within a narrow range. Right? That's not the definition that the book gives, that's just how I'm explaining it. So the book explains it as the maintenance of a constant internal environment. So maintenance of a constant internal environment. So the narrow range that I've mentioned, right, there is an ideal or perfect level at which different parameters meaning such as body temperature, right, osmotic concentration, right, blood glucose, and then you have, for example, O2 and CO2 levels in the blood. Right, so these are different parameters. So there is the ideal or perfect level, and this is mostly theoretical because these parameters do not stay at this ideal or perfect level. So at this level, marking it out with blue, is called the set point. Now what happens in reality is that I mentioned there is a narrow range, right? So there's an upper limit and a lower limit between which these parameters can vary. Now, what that limit is depends on what we're talking about, right? What the body temperature or osmotic concentration or whatever, right? So it's different for different situations, and the body keeps it within these two, right? So they constantly fluctuate. So you've got the upper and the lower level. The ideal level is, right, the set point. The book defines the set point as the physiological value around which the normal range fluctuates. Physiological value around which the normal range fluctuates. So that's the set point. Now, how does homeostasis take place, right? Before going into the various like situations where we can see homeostasis happening. Any questions about what homeostasis is based on what we talked about in these few lines? Any questions?
No.
Okay. So homeostasis takes place through a negative feedback control. What's negative feedback? It is when the body works, the system works to bring about a change that is opposite to the change that's happened, right? To counteract the change. So the body's control mechanisms work to counteract a change, right? And so to right, you've got something that is right ideally at the set point, then the value goes up, right? Now an example is blood glucose. We've been talking about blood glucose, so I'll just use that example, and the book has gone into it as well, right? So you've got the set point, and then you have some food, and so the blood glucose level goes up, right? This is detected, and what the body does is, because it's going up, right, the body sets things in motion to bring it back down, right? Now obviously, as I mentioned, it does not stay at the set point, right? It does not stay at a fixed value. So what happens is that it actually falls a bit lower than the set point, and oh, there's another change, right? And that's detected, and then it is right made to come back up, and then you can imagine it goes a bit over the set point, and oh, right. So that is why the level is constantly fluctuating. And it's a bit more detail than you need to know, a bit more detail, not a lot, but that is why the range, like the values fluctuate within a certain range, right? Because it's the body is constantly correcting the changes to keep it within that limit. It's not going to wait for it to, for example, go above the limit and like, oh, we've overshot. Why? Because if it happens to go above or below, right, then both of those, right, this is supposed to be a curve, not a V,
So,
right?
fever is also caused because of homeostasis.
What is because of homeostasis?
Fever,
Fever is not because of homeostasis. Fevers happen. I mean, one reason why they happen is because of an infection, right?
but like they also control the body temperature. No?
Yeah. So, right, that is a scenario where homeostasis takes a backseat, right? The body does
Okay.
not body does not want your temperature to, like, the body's temperature to rise. It doesn't. But other mechanisms cause the body temperature to rise, because raising the temperature will kill off the pathogen, the invading pathogen, the foreign, right, the harmful, whatever it is, virus or bacteria or whatever. The problem is that,
Okay.
that the raised temperature also affects your own body cells. And so having a high fever and having a fever for an extended period of time is dangerous for the person, him or herself. And that's why you take a cold shower, or you have like a sponge bath, a cold sponge bath, or you take medicines to reduce your fever, because it's going to hurt you as well, right? Otherwise, normally, right, just like all the other things mentioned over here, the homeostatic control keeps the body temperature within a certain range, right? So the ideal temperature, like the set point temperature, is I think 36.9 degrees centigrade, right? That's the ideal temperature. But if you measure the body temperature of a number of people, you will you will find some people with this body temperature at that time, but then, for some it might be lower, and for some it might be higher. And so it's a
Yeah.
very it's a very narrow range between which this is working. Okay, so when they say that there's a range, right, that does not mean you're talking about like between 0 and 100. No, right, it's a very narrow range, like 0.2 degrees centigrade. That's it, for example, in case of body temperature. And this also tells you how closely controlled everything is. Now,
But like it's also complicated to understand that different things happen because of like, different reasons.
well, different things do happen for different reasons. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you mean by it's complicated to understand?
I don't know, like it's sometimes like it's difficult to understand.
I mean, as a student,
Yeah. Or
well,
as a human as
well, learning is always taking place, right? Even now, when I'm teaching you, I am learning, right? Oh, and sometimes like I make mistakes, right? And I say,
yeah.
oh, I made a mistake, right? It's not like this, it's like that, whatever the case is. So you're always learning. You can't expect yourself to just pick up a book and look at it and memorize it in one go and like, oh, I know everything. That's not possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're interested, I mean, academics and syllabus is one thing, but if you're interested in knowing something, you try to read it, you try to see if someone's explained it in a simpler way, right? And you go through that, you'll understand something. It won't be like zero,
Yeah.
right? It won't be 100, obviously. Maybe it will, maybe it will be like 3%, 5%, sure, right? It won't like, if it's really bad, maybe it will be like 30%, right? You don't get most of it, but you do get like some of it in some parts, or this happens. If you keep at
Yeah.
it, like the next time you reads about something, you already have that 30% information. So now when you read it, the first time you read it, you didn't know anything. Now you have 30%. So when you read it with 30%, when you're done with it, you'll be at 50, maybe 60%, maybe. Right? So
Yeah.
so so learning is a continuous process, and you build upon things and then you add new information, and that becomes the basis, and then you build on that, and that's the process. It can be confusing, yes, right, for various reasons, as you said, but that's not a reason why you should maybe like give up, right? With time, you get the hang of things. Okay,
Yeah.
so right, this is the uh, basics of homeostasis. Now, as I mentioned, right, there are a number of different things, like, right, body temperature. So body temperature, right, it is detected, for example, by receptors in skin. So that is if in comparison to the external environment, or it is detected in the blood for the internal, right? So both of these, and the signal, because the signal goes, so we talk about receptors, so the impulse, right, the sensory impulse goes to the brain. And so body temperature is maintained primarily through the skin, right, by controlling blood flow, because heat is carried in the blood. So if the body temperature falls, right, then what happens is called vaso, which means vessel constriction, or constriction actually, right, which means becoming narrow. And so the blood vessels near the skin, they narrow, that reduces blood flow, which reduces heat loss through the skin, right? And so more heat is maintained and retained within the body. On the other hand, if the body temperature rises, and this is why after a fever you start sweating and you sweat a lot, right? Like you asked. If the body temperature rises, what happens is vasodilation, right? So dilation means becoming wider. And that means more blood flow will occur near the skin. And that is why, for example, when you have a fever, you look red, right? Because there's more blood flow near your skin. And right after exercise, because your body is heating up, right? Because a lot of energy is being consumed and heat is being produced, and so you sweat a lot and you can actually feel yourself hot, and your skin also becomes redder than it normally would be, right? And that is again because of vasodilation to remove all that excess heat from the body, right? So there's more blood flow, right, and more heat is lost. Right, then you have blood glucose, which you've talked about. So we know that if the blood glucose level goes up, insulin is released, which converts glucose to glycogen, right, in the liver. Now, if the blood sugar level, glucose level falls, then the other enzyme called glucagon is secreted, right, and it converts glycogen to glucose. Right, then you have the osmotic uh, potential or pressure of osmotic concentration of the blood. So how much water you have in the blood. Right, of tissue fluid and blood. So that's basically how much water there is. And so that is regulated by the kidneys. Right, and you already seen if there's more water in the body than it is needed, then more urine is formed. Right, dilute urine is formed because there's more water that's removed from the body. And if there's right, if the body needs water, then less urine is formed. The water is held in the body, right, to keep things normal. Then you have the O2 and CO2 concentrations, right? So both of these guys are in the blood. These levels are detected by the brain because obviously you've got blood flowing through the brain, so the receptors in the brain. Right, and they affect the lungs, so they affect your breathing. So if the carbon dioxide concentration increases, right, you will breathe faster. Right, that's one thing. And that is another reason why after exercise you're breathing. So you need more oxygen for more aerobic respiration, but you're also producing more carbon dioxide and you want to get rid of that carbon dioxide. You don't want it to build up in your body. And so both of those factors are causing you to breathe faster. And so all of these are homeostatic controls. Now, as far as uh, the regulation of blood glucose is concerned, right, the book gives detail about the various concentrations. So for that, I'll actually take you to the book. And we do have time, so definitely wrap this chapter up today. There we are. Okay, so for someone who has not eaten for 8 hours, the blood glucose concentration is between 90 to 100 milligram per 100 centimeter cube of blood. After they eat, it may rise to 140, and after 2 hours of eating, it will come back down. Okay, so if the concentration falls below 80, then glucagon is released, which will convert glycogen to glucose to maintain the blood glucose level. If the blood sugar level rises above 160, right, then, right, it's even beyond what insulin can handle. And so at that point, right, glucose is excreted by the kidneys. Now, this is dangerous. This is not something that's supposed to happen. Your body should be secreting insulin, which will be converting glucose to glycogen. If there's too much, because you only have like 100 grams of glycogen, it says about only 100 grams of glycogen is stored in the liver. So anything beyond that is converted to fat, and that's why people who overeat or eat a lot, they gain weight, right? So that's the fat accumulating. So if it gets to the point where the body is not able to convert it and it's being excreted in the kidneys, that means that things are wrong, like things are bad inside the body. Okay. Then, uh, if the blood glucose concentration falls below 40, so that's very low, obviously the brain is the highest consumer of energy, and so it's being deprived of that energy, right, because glucose is used for aerobic respiration, and that could lead to convulsions and a coma. Right, so the body needs to maintain the blood glucose level between 80 and 150 milligrams. Right, if it's too high for too long, then serious health problems can develop, such as, right, and this is a condition called hyperglycemia, and it can affect your vital organs and everything. Blurred vision, kidney disease. If anything goes wrong with the production and function of insulin, the person is said to have diabetes. There are two types of diabetes. Only diabetes type 1 is mentioned over here. Right, this is where insulin is being produced but not enough, and so the person needs, right, insulin injections to help control the blood glucose level. So this type 1 diabetes is sometimes called insulin dependent diabetes. Okay. All right. So symptoms are that you start feeling tired, you feel very thirsty, you have to go to the washroom frequently to urinate, and you're losing weight, interestingly. Right? And the weight loss is because the body starts to break down muscle and fat. Why is it breaking down muscle and fat? It's because you don't have glycogen stores in the body. Right? So there's no backup in terms of carbohydrate, and so they're going to utilize protein and fat and convert that to glucose to use, and so that's why you lose weight. Okay, now the structure of the skin they mention over here, right? This is the homeostatic control of body temperature. So you have a basal layer, right, and some of the cells are constantly dividing. They're old cells near the surface, and they're constantly being replaced. The basal layer and the cells above make up the epidermis, right? It also has the hair follicles, and they have hair erector muscles that are attached. Sometimes when you see your hair standing, that's because those muscles have contracted. Okay, the thickness of the epidermis and the quantity of hair depends on the part of the body. So yes, right, we all know that. The dermis, which is below the epidermis, right, contains connective tissue, hair follicles, sebaceous glands, and sweat glands, right, and blood vessels and nerve endings, and a layer of fat. There's a layer of fat beneath the dermis. So what happens, right? Again, if the temperature goes like the normal body temperature is between 35.8 and 37.7. Okay. If maintained for long, temperatures below 34 degrees centigrade or above 40 degrees centigrade can be dangerous, right? So it's the range is right larger than 0.2 degrees centigrade, right? It's about 2.9, no, sorry, 1.9, 35, 36, yeah. So 1.9 degrees centigrade, which is considerable. Okay. So, right, 34 is the lower limit, 40 is the upper limit, right? It can be dangerous. And what we're talking about is the core temperature, right? Not the skin temperature, right? So, what is the internal temperature of your body, not what the temperature of your skin is. And that's why the thermometer is placed under the tongue or somewhere, right? And even then, the temperature can be different from what the actual temperature is. So heat is lost from the body surface by conduction, convection, and radiation and evaporation, stuff that you'd be familiar with from physics, right? So all of that happens. The insulating properties of fatty tissue in the dermis help to reduce the amount of heat loss. And so obviously some animals have a lot of fat to insulate them because they live in cold environments. Okay. Uh, right. So two processes of heat gain and heat loss. So there's overheating. So more blood flows near the surface of the skin, allowing more heat to be exchanged with the surroundings. Right? This is not how you overheat. This is the body's response to overheating. And so sweating occurs. Sweat glands secrete sweat on the surface. Where does the sweat come from? It comes from water, and right, it has salts and stuff. So it's not the composition. How does sweat help? Right? From physics, you may know about the latent heat of vaporization, right? And the high specific heat capacity of water. So when water evaporates, evaporation happens when, right? It's not boiling, obviously, because you won't be around if it's at 100 degrees centigrade. But, right, the liquid gains energy and, turns to vapor at temperatures below boiling. So the sweat, which is liquid, right, and it's mostly water, takes the heat, which is being transferred from the blood, and uses that to evaporate. And as it evaporates, because it's removing the heat from the blood, from the body's cooling down. Okay, cooling. So, right, less blood flow near the surface of the skin, sweat production stops. Shivering may occur if it goes really down. Right, so uncontrollable bursts of rapid muscular contraction. The limbs release heat as a result of respiration, and the hair erector muscles contract, making them stand upright. Now, this is something that doesn't really work well with humans, right? But for birds and other like really hairy animals, cats and bears and birds and all the others. So when the hair are standing, when the hair erector muscles contract and the hair stand, what they do is they trap air around the body in the hair, and air is an insulator, right? So it does not allow the heat to be lost to the environment. For us, it still happens, but it's not effective, right? So we need to wear something warm like a shawl or a sweater or something, right? But vasoconstriction does occur, shivering does occur, sweat production stops when we are cold, right? So all of that. So, right, they talk about vasoconstriction, vasodilation over here, which I've already explained. And they talk about where it's detected. So a region in the brain called the hypothalamus contains a thermoregulatory center in which temperature receptors detect temperature changes in the blood and coordinate a response to them. Right? Temperature receptors are also present in the skin and they send information to the brain about temperature changes. So all of that, and we're done. Any questions? Yes, Haram?
No.
All clear?
Yeah.
So the basic concept is as long as you understand what the basic concept is, the rest of the details you can revisit and then right memorize. I would say understand the concept of what's happening. Obviously, right, understanding the concept is important, but then obviously there is memorization involved. You cannot skip that.
Yeah.
So right, as long as you understand the basic operation and the basic concept of how things are happening, you won't find it difficult. So
Yeah.
all's good, right? We'll stop here. Next time, inshallah, that's tomorrow. We will start with chapter 15, which is coordination and response in plants. So we've talked about coordination and control in uh, humans. Right, this is coordination
Mm,
response in plants, and I believe this is a short chapter. We can possibly get it done tomorrow, all in one go. We'll see.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Then. See you next time.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.